So, Zach, the NFL has announced that there are some new rule changes for the upcoming 2020 season. Let's go ahead and just break down what those rules are.
Yeah. So looking at some of the rules that happen, so expanded automatic replay. So they'll be adding replay to negated touchdowns and turnovers by penalty. So that's the new one added. Obviously, every scoring play is reviewed, every touchdown is reviewed. And they're also adding, they are adding one more thing. They're adding attempts, so play attempts or
So,
try attempts, so like field goals and things like that. They're adding expanded defensive player rules. So if a player on a kickoff or return, a player is considered defenseless until they can feasibly make a football move. Then there's game clock manipulation. So this is because of teams using dead ball penalties to save game clock. The clock will no longer stop for those in the fourth quarter and overtime unless are already deemed to be stopped due to other reasons. And then the last one is one more player can be taken off IR. So up from 2 to 3 players. But now the terminology for when you can come back has changed from weeks to games. So before you could come back in 8 weeks, and now it's 8 games. So if you have a bye week in the middle, the bye week doesn't count anymore. Those are kind of the rules that have changed, Tanner.
so, Zach, as we kind of look back at these rules, I think there's some really important ones that are here. I think for myself personally, the defenseless player one, in my opinion, I think is really important. And I think that's because we've seen a lot of this, especially in the past couple of seasons, where a player is trying, as they're getting ready to return, whether it be a punt or a kickoff, primarily for punts, that they are not in that they are in a defenseless position sometimes. And when we were talking about this, as we went over everything, it's basically as long as they can catch the ball and then they can have like one or two steps to get ready to go around the tackle. So I think that is a very important rule and the most important on this list. But I'm really curious to think for yourself and for the overall game, which one do you think is the most important for all teams in the NFL?
So I think the defenseless player move is probably going to be it's a player safety rule. I mean, player safety is always important. The one thing that I'm going to see, which is the trouble, I think, could be what is considered a defensive player on punts and returns. And I think that will always be a question. We've had the trouble with the catch rule for years. What can happen there? And I wouldn't be surprised if a similar thing is happening for defenseless players in the coming future. The other thing is, I think changing the term for weeks to games is pretty big on the injured reserve list because what does that like? How is that going to affect season? So because that means a player that got injured in week 1, put on IR, can't return now until week 10 instead of week 9 if there's a bye week at somewhere in the middle there. And that can really actually affect teams because two important players that got put into reserve for different teams. One of them has a bye week, one of them doesn't. The team that doesn't have a bye week all of a sudden can get that player back a week early. And if they're ready to go, I mean, that can really affect a win or loss and get the playoffs. It For the most part, it probably won't, but there could be some cases where that happens.
And I think with the automatic replay review, replay has been something that has really always kind of been talked about throughout the league, throughout fans for the last couple of years, especially, with when they can use it, when they can't. So I think this is one that I think a lot of teams will agree on because, and we've seen this throughout the course, especially recently, where teams have actually lost games because they could look at a replay, they couldn't look at a replay. What do you think the biggest impact on that rule is going to be, especially as the kind of new part to it is that for a successful or unsuccessful PAT or field goal attempt? Is there anything that really kind of stands out with that or any previous games that you think this rule could have especially affected?
I can't think of a time when a kick went in or didn't go in, or it should have gone in or didn't go in, but then they called it good they called it the wrong thing. But I mean, They already review every score, and they do it quick enough that it doesn't even really like it's not going to really slow down the game. So I don't see this happening, but it could come up in a big moment where the review actually comes in handy. So we'll see kind of what happens there. But yeah, I can't think of a time when that really mattered. But it's better to, I think, do that. The one I think is the negated plays by penalty scores, because that could that that could, like, you see a touchdown run, but then there's a foul or a penalty away from the ball, and all of a sudden you're calling, yeah, it's getting called back because of that. And I don't know, yeah, is that gonna, how many times are we gonna lose plays or game plays because a foul was called, but there really wasn't a foul, or things like that.
It'll be interesting to see how these rules really affect the game once it comes back to live action. And then also how fans will react to that as we all eagerly await the start of the NFL season.